There are certain memories that don't fade with time. Instead, they sharpen, like a jagged piece of glass stuck in your mind, cutting deeper every time you try to examine it. I don't tell this story at parties. I don't post it on forums. I'm writing this down now solely as a warning. If you ever feel that primal tug in your gut telling you something is wrong, listen to it. It might be the only thing that keeps you alive. This happened 3 years ago when I was 21. I was a junior in college, and my uncle had asked me to house-sit his property while he and his wife went on a month-long cruise. The house wasn't just a house. It was a sprawling, renovated farmhouse in rural Ohio, sitting on about 40 acres of cornfields that stretched endlessly into the horizon. It was the kind of place that was beautiful in the daylight, but turned into a black void once the sun went down. For the first week, the isolation was peaceful, but by the second Friday, the silence became deafening. I invited my best friend Ryan to drive up from campus for the weekend. We planned to do what any broke college students would do: order too much pizza, play video games until our eyes bled, and enjoy the freedom of a massive house with a fully stocked liquor cabinet. By 1 a.m., the novelty of Call of Duty had worn off. Outside, a thunderstorm had rolled in, the kind that shakes the window panes and drowns out the world. The power flickered a few times, threatening to cut out, which killed the mood for gaming. "You know what would be terrifying in a place this big?" Ryan asked, staring out into the pitch-black yard where the rain was hammering against the glass. "Don't start," I said, already feeling a bit on edge. "Sardines," he grinned. For those who don't know, sardines is the reverse of hide and seek. One person hides, and the other person seeks. When the seeker finds the hider, they don't announce it. They simply hide with them, packing into the same spot like sardines until the last person finds the group. Since it was just the two of us, it was basically just hide and seek, but with the added element that the seeker had to join the hider in silence. It sounded childish, I know. But in a 3-story farmhouse with a basement that smelled like wet earth and history, the idea gave me a legitimate adrenaline spike. We agreed on the rules. All lights off. Flashlights, only allowed for moving from room to room, must be turned off when hiding or entering a room to search. And the basement was off limits because, frankly, neither of us wanted to go down there. Ryan hid first. I sat on the living room couch, counting to 50 loudly to be heard over the thunder. 49, 50, ready or not. I clicked on my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air. The house groaned, the settling of wood that sounds too much like footsteps. I checked the kitchen first. Empty. The dining room. Empty. I moved upstairs, the carpet dampening my footsteps. I checked the guest rooms, the closets, behind the heavy drapes. Nothing. Finally, I went to the master bedroom. There was a massive walk-in closet at the far end. I approached it slowly, the floorboards whining under my weight. I clicked off my light and yanked the door open. "Gotcha," I whispered. Ryan was crouched in the corner behind a row of winter coats. He jumped, hitting his head on a shelf. We both burst out laughing, the tension breaking instantly. It was just a game. Just two idiots scaring themselves. "Your turn," Ryan said, wiping tears from his eyes. "Count from the kitchen. I bet you can't find a spot I won't check." I went downstairs and started counting. I wanted a spot that was psychologically difficult to enter. I thought about the attic, but the pull-down ladder was too loud. Then I remembered the sunroom at the back of the house. It had these long, heavy velvet curtains. Behind the sofa in there was a tight squeeze, completely shadowed. I settled in, pulling my knees to my chest. I listened. The house was a symphony of noises. The rain lashed against the roof like gravel. The wind howled through the chimney. But then, I heard it. The distinct rhythmic thud, thud, thud of footsteps on the floor above me. Ryan was searching the bedrooms again. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My legs were starting to cramp. Then, I heard the footsteps descend the stairs. They were slow, deliberate. They didn't sound like Ryan's sneakers. Ryan was a frantic walker, full of energy. These steps were heavy, like someone wearing work boots. Thump, thump, thump. They moved into the kitchen, then the dining room. They were getting closer to the sunroom. My heart hammered against my ribs, a physical drumming that I was sure was audible in the silence. The door to the sunroom creaked open. I held my breath. A beam of light swept across the room. It hit the curtains, then the sofa. The light clicked off. I waited for Ryan to say, "Found you!" or to jump over the couch. But there was only silence. Then, the soft rustling of fabric. Someone was crawling behind the sofa with me. The rule of sardines. When you find the person, you hide with them. I felt the cushion depress as the person squeezed into the narrow space beside me. It was pitch black. I couldn't see a thing. I shifted my leg to make room, my knee brushing against their jeans. "You took long enough," I whispered, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. There was no answer. The person shifted, settling in closer. That's when the smell hit me. Ryan uses some expensive, overpowering cologne, something citrusy. But the scent radiating from the person next to me was vile. It smelled like wet dog, stale tobacco, and something metallic, like old copper pennies. It was the scent of something that had been outside in the storm for too long. A cold drop of water from their jacket landed on my bare arm. "Ryan?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Heavy breathing. That was the only response. A wet, rattling breath that sounded like there was fluid in the lungs. My pocket buzzed. The vibration against my thigh felt like an earthquake. I froze. The breathing next to me stopped. The person, the thing, shifted, turning its body toward me. I could feel heat radiating off them. I slowly, agonizingly, pulled my phone out of my pocket. I kept the screen against my leg, shielding the light. I tilted it just enough to see the notification. It was a text from Ryan. "Ryan, 1:42 a.m. Dude, are you asleep? I've been counting for like 20 minutes. I'm still in the kitchen." The blood in my veins turned to ice. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. If Ryan was in the kitchen, then who was sitting 6 inches away from me in the dark? The breathing beside me resumed, deeper this time. A hand, rough, calloused, and freezing cold, brushed against my ankle. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. Pure lizard brain instinct took over. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore his throat, and threw myself over the back of the sofa. I scrambled across the floor, knocking over a lamp. I didn't look back. I didn't turn on my flashlight. I ran blind. "Ryan, run! Get out!" I screamed, tearing through the hallway. I heard Ryan shout something from the kitchen, confusing and panic in his voice, but I didn't stop. I hit the front door so hard my shoulder went numb, fumbling with the deadbolt. Behind me, from the sunroom, came a sound that haunts me to this day. It wasn't a chase. It was a laugh. A low, dry, wheezing chuckle that didn't sound entirely human. I burst out into the storm, the rain instantly soaking me to the bone. Ryan collided with me on the porch a second later, looking terrified. "What? What is it?" he yelled over the thunder. "Car, now!" We sprinted to my Civic parked in the driveway. I fumbled the keys, dropping them in the mud. I scrambled for them, my fingers shaking so violently I could barely grip the metal. I looked up at the house. Lightning flashed, illuminating the front of the farmhouse. In the window of the sunroom, standing perfectly still, was a silhouette. It was a man, tall and broad. He was pressing his face against the glass. He wasn't looking at us. He was smiling. A wide, toothless grin that stretched too far across his face. We peeled out of the driveway, mud slinging against the wheel wells. We didn't stop driving until we reached a 24-hour diner 3 towns over. We called the police from the parking lot. They searched the house an hour later. They found the back door, the one in the laundry room, unlocked. Muddy boot prints were tracked all through the house, up the stairs, into the bedrooms, and finally pooling in the sunroom behind the sofa. But the most disturbing part wasn't that he had been in the house. It was what they found in the attic. The police found a nest of blankets, food wrappers, and a peephole drilled into the floor, looking directly down into the guest bedroom where I had been sleeping for the past week. They never found the man. The police said it was likely a drifter using the storm for cover, but I know better. He knew the layout of the house. He knew how to move silently, and he knew exactly how to play the game. Sometimes late at night, when I'm lying in bed and the house settles, I hear a creak, and for a split second, I can smell that scent of wet wool and stale tobacco, and I feel the phantom sensation of a cold hand brushing against my ankle. We stopped playing games after that night, because once you realize that you're never truly alone, the game never really ends. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over the bayou when the clock ticks past 2 a.m. It's not a true silence, but a heavy, humid blanket of white noise, the drone of cicadas, the distant croak of bullfrogs, and the wet slap of water against mud. Most people find it peaceful. I used to find it peaceful. But now, whenever I hear that specific frequency of nature at night, my chest tightens, and I'm right back on that rotting wooden dock, paralyzed by a fear so primal it felt like freezing to death in the middle of a heat wave. It was the summer of 2019. I had just finished my sophomore year of college and was back home in Louisiana helping my dad with his renovation business. My cousin Marcus lived about 20 minutes away. We didn't have much to do in our small town, so our weekends usually consisted of driving down dirt roads, drinking cheap beer, and night fishing. On this particular Friday, Marcus suggested a spot we hadn't been to since we were kids. It was a secluded inlet off the Black River, accessible only by a mile-long service road that had been abandoned by the logging companies years ago. It was a hassle to get to, but the catfish there were massive, and more importantly, it was completely isolated. We wouldn't have to deal with game wardens or other fishermen. We arrived around 10:30 p.m. The humidity was suffocating, the air thick with the smell of stagnant water and pine needles. We parked Marcus's Silverado at the top of the levee and hiked the rest of the way down to the water, carrying our rods, a tackle box, and a cooler full of ice and Coke. For the first few hours, it was exactly what we needed. We set up our lanterns, cast our lines into the murky black water, and just sat on the edge of the old, weathered dock, talking about girls and how much we hated our summer jobs. The normalcy of it was comforting. The only light came from our 2 LED lanterns and the faint glow of the moon filtering through the Spanish moss hanging from the cypress trees. Around 1:15 a.m., the biting stopped. The water went still, turning into a sheet of black glass. Marcus stood up to stretch, cracking his back. "I'm gonna head up to the truck," he said, gesturing toward the levee with his thumb. I left my dip in the glove box. "You want anything?" "Nah, I'm good," I said, eyes fixed on the tip of my fishing rod, hoping for a twitch. "All right, be back in 10. I listened to his boots crunching on the gravel path until the sound faded into the thick brush. Then, the silence rushed back in. This is where the gut feeling started. It wasn't anything I saw initially. It was just a sudden, overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Sitting there on that dock, with the dense, unlit forest at my back and the black water in front of me, I felt like I was being observed. I told myself I was being paranoid. Too many horror movies, too much caffeine. I focused on the water. Then, I heard it. Splash. It was soft, distinct. It came from the shoreline to my left, about 30 yards away, where the reeds grew 6 feet high. It didn't sound like a fish jumping. A fish makes a clean splash. This sounded like something heavy and solid stepping into the water and then freezing. "Marcus?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet air. No answer, just the drone of the insects. I reasoned that Marcus might have taken a leak on his way up the hill and slipped, or maybe it was a gator sliding off the bank. I kept my eyes on the reed line. The lantern light didn't reach that far, so it was just a wall of shadows. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked my phone. 1:35 a.m. Marcus should have been back by now. It was only a 5-minute walk to the truck. I was about to text him when a sound made my blood run cold. It was a whistle. It came from the right side of the dock, the opposite direction of the splash. It was a slow, three-note tune. High, low, high. The problem wasn't the whistle itself. The problem was that it was the exact tune Marcus had been humming earlier while he was baiting his hook. But the tone was wrong. It was flat, mechanical, lacking the human nuance of a casual hum. "Stop messing around, man," I said, trying to sound annoyed, but my voice wavered. "You scared me. Come on out." Silence. Then, from the darkness on the right, a voice spoke. "Help." It was a whisper, barely audible over the cicadas. But it didn't sound like a cry for help. It sounded monotone, flat, like someone reading the word off a piece of paper rather than feeling the emotion. And it didn't sound like Marcus. I stood up slowly, grabbing the fillet knife from the top of the tackle box. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Who's there?" I yelled. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration made me jump, nearly dropping the knife. I pulled it out, keeping the screen dim. Marcus, 1:38 a.m. Truck battery is dead. Trying to jump it with the portable pack. Coming back down. If Marcus was at the truck, who was whistling? Who whispered? I looked at the text, then back at the darkness to my right. The realization hit me like a physical blow. There was someone in the woods, and they were trying to lure me off the dock. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and the lantern, leaving the expensive rods and the cooler behind. I started walking backward down the dock, toward the path, keeping my eyes scanning the tree line. Crunch. A footstep. Heavy. Deliberate. It came from the path between me and the truck. Someone stepped out from behind a large oak tree, blocking my exit. They were standing about 20 feet away, just at the edge of the lantern's reach. I couldn't make out a face. They were wearing dark clothing, maybe a hoodie, but I could see they were tall, abnormally tall. And they were holding something long in their hand. It looked like a tire iron or a crowbar. I froze. My brain short-circuited. Fight or flight kicks in, but sometimes you just freeze. The figure didn't move. They just stood there, blocking the only way back to Marcus and the truck. Then, the figure raised a hand and pointed a finger directly at me. From the reeds on the left side of the dock, the spot where I had heard the splash earlier, I heard the rustling of grass parting. Someone else was there. There were two of them. That realization broke my paralysis. I wasn't going to make it to the truck. I spun around and sprinted to the end of the dock. I didn't think, I just reacted. I dove into the black water. The shock of the cold water knocked the wind out of me, but I kicked hard, swimming underwater as far as my lungs would allow. I swam parallel to the shore, heading downstream, away from the inlet. When I surfaced for air, I stayed low, treading water under the overhang of a fallen willow tree. I looked back at the dock. The lantern I had dropped was still on, casting a sideways beam across the wood. I could see two silhouettes standing there. They weren't looking at the water. They were looking at my fishing gear. One of them kicked the tackle box into the water. Then, they turned and started walking up the path toward the truck, toward Marcus. Panic, real and blinding, set in. I scrambled up the muddy bank, slipping on roots and slime. I didn't have my phone. It was in my pocket, likely dead from the water. I ran through the woods, tearing my clothes on thorns, ignoring the burning in my lungs. I had to cut the angle and get to the levee road before they reached the truck. I burst out of the tree line onto the gravel road just as I saw the headlights of the Silverado flicker on. I screamed Marcus's name, waving my arms frantically. The truck was about 50 yards away. I saw the brake lights flare red. Marcus had started the engine. He must have seen me in the rearview mirror, looking like a swamp monster, dripping wet and frantic. He threw the truck into reverse, spinning the tires on the gravel, and backed up toward me. I didn't even wait for him to stop completely. I vaulted into the bed of the truck and banged on the roof. "Go, go, go!" Marcus floored it. The truck fishtailed, gravel spraying everywhere as we tore out of there. I looked back one last time. Standing at the edge of the woods, right where the path met the road, were the two figures. They were just watching us leave. One of them raised their hand and gave a slow, mocking wave. We didn't stop until we hit the main highway. When I climbed into the cab, shivering and covered in mud, Marcus was pale. "I saw them," he whispered. "In the mirror. Before you came out of the woods. I thought it was you at first." One of them walked right up to the passenger door and tried the handle. We drove straight to the sheriff's station. We told them everything. To their credit, they took it seriously. They sent a patrol car out there that night. They found our fishing gear on the dock, smashed to pieces. They found footprints, 2 sets of heavy boot prints in the mud. But the scariest part wasn't the footprints. It was what they found in the tall reeds, right where I had heard the first splash. They found a small makeshift campsite, a sleeping bag, flattened grass, and a pile of cigarette butts. The police estimated it had been there for at least 3 days. Someone had been living in those reeds, watching us, waiting. They never caught them. The police said it was likely vagrants or poachers, but poachers don't mimic your friend's whistling. Poachers don't try to flank you. I haven't been fishing since. I can't be near the water at night, because every time I hear a splash in the dark or the wind rustling through tall grass, I wonder if it's just nature, or if someone has been waiting there for days, just watching, waiting for the lights to go out. There is a specific kind of invincibility you feel when you're 17 and surrounded by your friends. It's a false sense of security that blinds you to the reality that sometimes the danger isn't lurking in the shadows. It's standing right in front of you, smiling, asking to be let in. This happened back in the summer of 2016 in a quiet, dusted-over suburb just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. I was living with my dad at the time in a community that bordered a massive, undeveloped stretch of desert we simply called the Wash. It was miles of dried-up riverbeds, sagebrush, and darkness. Because it was too hot to do anything during the day, my friends and I practically lived nocturnally. That night, it was just me, my best friend Marco, and his cousin, Dizzy. We were bored, sitting on the tailgate of Marco's truck at the edge of the cul-de-sac, trying to figure out what to do. It was around 11:30 p.m. The air was still thick with heat, hovering around 90 degrees even that late. "Let's play Manhunt," Dizzy suggested. 2 hiders, 1 seeker. Boundaries are the end of the pavement to the old water tower. We hadn't played tag since we were kids, but in the pitch-black desert, with coyotes howling in the distance, it had a different vibe. It felt intense. We agreed. I volunteered to be the seeker first. I stood by the truck, eyes closed, counting to 100 loud enough to echo off the canyon walls. 99, 100, ready or not. I clicked on my tactical flashlight, a heavy-duty mag light my dad kept in the garage, and swept the beam across the scrubland. The desert is eerie at night. The light catches the eyes of spiders and jackrabbits, making them glow green. I caught Marco within 10 minutes. He was terrible at hiding, trying to crouch behind a creosote bush that was half his size. We laughed about it, walking back toward the truck to wait for Dizzy to give up or get caught. That's when we saw him. Standing near the tailgate of the truck, just outside the ring of light from the street lamp, was a man. He wasn't Dizzy. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a faded gray hoodie and jeans, which was bizarre considering it was nearly triple digits out. He was just standing there, staring at the empty bed of the truck where we had left our sodas. My stomach dropped. That immediate biological gut feeling that tells you something is wrong flared up instantly. "Yo," Marco said, his voice cracking slightly. "Can we help you?" The man turned slowly. He didn't look crazy. He didn't look like a drug addict. He looked unnervingly normal. He had a clean shave and a calm, polite smile. "Sorry to startle you boys," he said. His voice was incredibly smooth, almost monotone. "I was just cutting through the wash to get to the Circle K on the main road and heard you counting. Brought back memories." "Oh, yeah, just killing time," I said, gripping the heavy mag light a little tighter. "Manhunt, right?" the man asked. He gestured to the vast darkness behind us. "I used to be the champion of this game. You guys mind if I do a round? I've got time to kill. Marco and I exchanged a look. It was weird, definitely. But we were three athletic teenagers, and he was just one guy. In that naive teenage way, we didn't want to seem rude or scared. Sure, Marco said, shrugging. Dizzy is still out there hiding. We can restart once he gets back. No need, the man said. I'll go hide with him. You two count. Give me, let's say, 5 minutes. I want to go deep. Before we could object, he turned and jogged into the darkness. He moved silently. That was the first thing that really bothered me. For a guy wearing heavy work boots, he didn't make a sound on the gravel. He just dissolved into the night. Marco and I waited. The atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't fun anymore. We find him, we tag him, we tell him to leave, Marco whispered. Agreed. We counted to 5 minutes. Then, we set out together. We decided to stick together this time. Safety in numbers. The desert was silent. Usually you hear crickets, wind, something, but it felt like the presence of this stranger had muted the world. We swept our lights over rocks and gullies. Dizzy, I whisper shouted. Come out, man. Game's over. Nothing. We walked for about 15 minutes, venturing further toward the water tower than we usually did. The beam of my flashlight swung across an old, rusted drainage pipe about 4 feet in diameter. Check the pipe, Marco said. I knelt down and shined the light inside. It was empty, except for some trash and tumbleweeds. But as I stood up, the light caught something resting on top of the concrete pipe casing. It was a backpack. A generic black JanSport backpack. Is that Dizzy's? Marco asked. No, I said. Dizzy didn't bring a bag. I walked over to it. It looked new, but it was covered in dust. Against my better judgment, I unzipped the main compartment. The sound of the zipper seemed deafening in the silence. Inside, there was no wallet, no ID, no water. There was a roll of heavy-duty duct tape, a pack of industrial zip ties, a hammer, and a long, serrated hunting knife. My blood ran cold. I felt a chill ripple through my entire body, starting at my scalp and moving down to my toes. This wasn't a drifter cutting through to get a soda. This was a kit. A kill kit. Marco, I whispered, holding up the bag. We need to go. Now. Marco looked at the contents and his face went pale. Where is Dizzy? I don't know, but we need to get to the truck. We turned to run back toward the streetlights, abandoning the stealth of the game. We sprinted. The gravel crunched loudly under our feet, sounding like gunshots in the quiet night. We were about halfway back when Marco grabbed my arm, yanking me to a stop behind a mesquite bush. Listen, he hissed. I held my breath. From somewhere to our right, from the direction of the houses, not the desert, came a sound. It was whistling. A slow, 3-note whistle. Low, high, low. It was the same pattern I used to whistle to call my dog. He's behind us, I breathed. He circled around. We didn't wait. We bolted. We burst out of the desert and onto the pavement of the cul-de-sac, our chests heaving. Marco's truck was there, but Dizzy wasn't. I fumbled for my phone to call 911, my fingers shaking so bad I dropped it twice. Just as I unlocked the screen, Dizzy came walking out from the side of my house, holding a soda, looking completely relaxed. Dizzy! I screamed. Get in the truck! He looked confused. What? Why? I got bored waiting for you guys, so I came back to get a drink. Did you see a guy? Marco yelled, scanning the tree line. A guy in a gray hoodie? No, Dizzy said. I've been here for 10 minutes. I grabbed Dizzy and shoved him toward the house. Get inside, lock the doors. We ran into my living room, slamming the heavy oak door and throwing the deadbolt. We turned off all the lights and peeked through the blinds. The cul-de-sac was empty. The street lamp buzzed overhead. The desert beyond looked like a black ocean. Call the cops, Marco said, pacing the kitchen. I did. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. We gave them the description. We told them about the backpack. 2 officers went out into the wash to retrieve it. They came back empty-handed. "There's no bag out there, son," the older officer said, looking at me with that look adults give kids when they think they're pranking them. "We checked the pipe. We checked the tower. Nothing." "It was there," I insisted. "Tape, zip ties, a knife." They took a report, but ultimately they chalked it up to an overactive imagination or a prank played by one of us on the others. They told us to stay inside and left. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in my living room with the TV on low volume, watching SpongeBob specifically, just to have something mindless to focus on. Around 3:15 a.m., the motion sensor light in the backyard clicked on. My backyard is enclosed by a 6-foot cinder block wall. The only way in is through the side gate, which is always padlocked. We froze. I crawled to the sliding glass door and peeked through the gap in the curtains. The yard was empty. The pool water was still. Then, I looked down. Pressed against the glass, right at the bottom where the floor meets the door, was a Polaroid photo. It was facing inward. I unlocked the door, slid it open an inch, grabbed the photo, and slammed it shut. My hands were trembling as I turned it over. It was a picture of the 3 of us. It had been taken tonight. We were sitting on the tailgate of Marco's truck. The angle of the photo was from the bushes directly behind us. He had been there before we even started playing. He hadn't walked up from the wash. He had been watching us, waiting for the right moment to make contact. But that wasn't the worst part. Written on the bottom of the photo in black Sharpie were 3 words: "Player 4 wins." We never saw the man in the gray hoodie again. The police dusted the photo for fingerprints, but it was clean. I moved away for college a year later, but my dad still lives in that house. He says sometimes, on really hot nights when the windows are open, he hears whistling coming from the wash. I don't go into the desert anymore, and I don't play games in the dark, because the scariest part of hide and seek isn't that you might not find the person you're looking for. It's that you might find someone you weren't looking for at all.